Welcome to the 902 Podcast, the official podcast of the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm Captain John Vick, and I want to thank you for tuning in. This podcast will give you an inside look at LSO with topics and guests to discuss public safety issues impacting Lancaster County. Be sure to subscribe for highlights on news, cases, and the people working for you at LSO. You can also follow us across social media by searching for @LSO Nebraska. That's @LSO Nebraska on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Welcome to a Police Week episode of the 902 Podcast. We're in studio today with Sheriff Terry Wagner.
Good morning.
Chief Deputy Ben Houchin.
Morning.
And we have a very special guest on today's podcast, Barb Dodge.
Good morning.
Hi, Barb. Barb is a very important part of our LSO family, and you'll soon understand why. Her husband, Craig, served as an LSO deputy from 1985 to 1987 when he was killed in the line of duty. Following that tragedy, Barb went on to become the national president of COPS, or Concerns of Police Survivors, and we're really excited to have her here to talk about her story and National Police Week. Barb, thank you so much for coming on the show. Before we get into all of that stuff, I wanted to just have a little bit of background for our listeners on you and Craig. Where were you from? Where did you guys meet?
Well, we were both living in Hastings at the time, and he was with the ambulance service there. He and his brother owned the ambulance service there, which was Adams County Ambulance at the time, and he had worked there for quite some time. And I applied for a job there, and I got a job, and then I guess I eventually married my boss. How's that sound?
Oh, wow.
Hey.
I did, yes. And then left the company. So.
And eventually you guys moved here then to Lancaster County.
Yes.
So how did that work with Craig becoming a deputy here? How did that take place?
Well, Craig has always loved law enforcement, and he was involved really in early days, and even right after he got out of the Marines and later. So he was, and then worked as a reserve deputy in Hastings and also in Lincoln, which I understand now the reserves that doesn't exist anymore, but he was involved in that and loved it. And then when he decided to get out of the ambulance business, he just thought he had another job for a while, and then he said, I just really love law enforcement. I would like to go see if I can apply and make it through the training and do that. And he was very happy to be able to do that.
So, Sheriff, I think Craig started as a court officer for a short time
right
before he became a deputy here. Was that kind of a typical progression for people back then?
The reserve program that Barb just referred to was a very good avenue for people to see, do I like LSO? And for LSO to say, do we like, this guy?
Yeah.
And we had a number of deputies who progressed from the reserve either into the court officer positions and then to deputies, or, Mike Novacek was another good example.
Sure.
A number of different deputies came from that same pathway. So
okay.
it was very helpful. So, and Craig was about 40 when he came to LSO. So he was much older than our typical recruit.
Yeah, he was, and he said the training was a little rough, and he was determined to do it. And he said he could kick anybody's butt except in running. And he said, because I run like a rock, I couldn't outrun anybody. So, but he did great on everything else, I guess.
So what was life like for you as a law enforcement spouse then when Craig took on his full-time deputy position?
Well, it was different because of the hours that you worked, when you're getting off work at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And the holidays, working the holidays and everything. And so you just learn to work around it. You just have Christmas dinner at a different time, and you have holidays at different times so that he can be there. And you just do it because that's the way the life is.
Right.
You just figure out a way to do it. And it is hard times because sometimes you have to miss kids' games and things like that you don't want to miss out on, and that's part of the job. But oftentimes you could work around and at least participate in part of the thing. So he loved it.
And you had kids at home at that time?
Right, 2 kids. I had 2 kids from a previous marriage, as did he.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. And so, and I'm right in the trenches with that right now. Mm-hmm. So I can definitely relate. I'm glad that I'm not working third shift anymore, because that's certainly hard on some of those things. But yeah, it's definitely a juggling act and a balancing act for the officer, but also a spouse. So there's just a lot that goes into that. So, so walk us through kind of from your eyes, what took place on March 14th, 1987.
Before when I think about, in general, thinking about his life in law enforcement, I didn't worry about him. And there are a lot of law enforcement wives that say that they worry every day. Every day when they would walk out the door, they would worry about him. And I just didn't, because I knew he was really good at his job, and he was a really good, like a negotiator, and really good at de-escalation, and was good with his gun. He was really street smart in those ways, so I just didn't worry about him. And so the morning that I get a knock on the door, and there were two officers at my door at, I don't know, whatever, 6 a.m. or something like that. Every police family knows that's a bad thing. So they were wise enough to know that there were kids in the house, and made arrangements, actually sent 2 cars so that they could take the kids someplace else, and had already made arrangements for the kids to go to Woody's house. To Bill Woodruff's house was another deputy that the kids knew, and they'd been to his house, and so they had no problem getting in the car with somebody and going to his house, and took me to the hospital and stayed with me there. And actually we got there, I think before he did, when they brought him in by ambulance. And I knew that when we listened to the radio traffic that they were coding him. And I knew that they told me that he had been shot, but didn't tell me where that he was shot. And I kept trying to picture that he'd been shot in the leg or something. And I'm thinking, how will he survive his job if he loses his leg? And that's all I could think about, was that, how if he loses his leg? Then when I heard that they were coding him, I thought, okay, he wasn't shot in the leg. And having been in the world of EMS myself, if they're coding somebody with a gunshot, it's trouble. It's the worst.
And so for those of our listeners that don't know, while you were sleeping overnight, Craig had responded to a domestic violence call in Hickman, Nebraska, which is just south of Lincoln. And while he was there, there was a wife who had been arguing with her husband, and husband, unbeknownst to Craig, had a handgun. And while Craig was standing at the door, trying to negotiate with them and trying to kind of buy some time for backup to get there, Craig was shot. And so that's what led to you getting the knock on the door in the morning. So you're there at the hospital, and you kind of already have some idea that things aren't looking good. So how did you then get the news?
Well, I was in the room when they finally decided to stop the code, and it's surreal. It just, feel like you don't have any legs, and it's not even to cry, but it's just this is way too much to try to get in one moment, and eventually left and go home, and then you try to figure out, what does all this mean? And then you're placed with immediately planning a funeral, which is, especially a police funeral, and my head just spins. And everyone was really good. And I do want to say that I hear some really bad stories of death notifications for police families, and of unbelievable, crazy, and unkind things that are done. And I have to say that LSO did everything right. They couldn't have managed it better, having really not had a plan for that, as I understand they do now. But there was really not a plan in place for it, and they did everything right. They had, like I said, planned for the kids, and for somebody to take me, and to somebody to notify his parents, and do all those things. That they just did everything right. I was blessed that they performed as professionally and as sensitively and kindly as they did.
Can I ask, would you suggest the deputies who would be transporting you to not have the radio on, so you would not have known all that, or did that matter to you, or what is your thoughts? Because there's a lot of times with criminals, we'll turn the radio down so they don't hear what we're saying. And did that change anything, or do you even think about it?
I don't have any memory of that of it all with the radio, but I sure think it sounds like a good idea to not hear, especially like in his case, they were looking for him, for his shooter.
Right.
And they found him not too long after that. But it sure sounds like a good idea to turn it down. They don't need to hear that. And you have enough confusion, and you do want answers, to what happened. And it's really hard when immediately they don't have many answers for you in this kind of situation, in a shooting.
Yep.
And Sheriff, we'd had 2 line of duty deaths prior to this. Both of those were health related incidents, heart attacks. So this was the first really felonious killing of a law enforcement officer that's happened in our history.
That's correct.
So I know that Lincoln PD had probably had some, but this was a pretty big deal for the community.
It was a big deal. I think the last police officer who died in line of duty was like 1968 or 69. So it'd been 20 years probably since there'd been a line of duty death, and that was a motorcycle crash, I think.
Okay.
Ron Tusing had just taken office in January, and this happened March 14th. So he'd only been in office 2.5 months when this happened. So you can imagine a new sheriff coming in. He knew a lot of us from, working with us as a Lincoln police officer, but not knowing us intimately like you would. So, and I thought he did a great job. I mean, looking in hindsight, and when I first took office, and 3 months later, it's the anniversary of Craig's death, and I'm thinking, I would hope I would do as good as Ron Tusing did, trying to keep us all together, and trying to help with all that stuff. It's just, there's a lot going on. And, it was a crazy night. I remember that Saturday as, I probably remember that day more clearly than I remember my kid's birth.
Yeah. Barb, I know everybody's experience is different. That week after, from when Craig died to the funeral, do you remember a lot of specifics during that time? Was it more of a blur? How did that week progress for you?
I don't remember a lot from that week. I don't remember a lot from the funeral. I remember a lot of people, and I remember he was buried in Waverly, and I remember looking out the back of the car and seeing, it was a crummy day. It was rainy and chilly, and cars coming over the hills with the lights on. I could see for, miles behind us. But I really don't remember anything of the funeral. It's really kind of strange things that you remember and don't remember. Because you're just in a fog, I guess, from things. And one crazy thing, I needed to get away from the house because there were people coming and going, and so I walked to the grocery store just to buy something. And it's this crazy thing to remember, but there was a couple standing in one of the aisles buying cereal, and they were arguing over which one cereal was like 29 cents less than the other one and which one they should buy. I wanted to scream at them and say, it's 29 cents. What in the world are you arguing about? Do you not know that my husband was just killed? Do you not know? And of course they didn't know any of those things, but it just was a silly thing to sit in mind to say, what things do we argue about that really don't matter? We can just get caught up in the littlest things. And that was, so that's one of the few things, honestly, that I remember from that week.
I had that same experience because on that Saturday, I had gotten off duty, gone home, and got called back when the shooting occurred. And then I can't remember, one of the sergeants or lieutenants said, we need to staff this place tonight. You need to go home and get some sleep, because he knew I hadn't had any sleep. Mm-hmm. So I come back to work at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I get detailed to a theft from a barn that happened sometime over the last 3 months. Mm. And it was so insignificant compared to what had happened earlier in the day. I was angry that we got called to take this report of a stolen whatever it was sometime in the last 3 months. And I just remember that same thing, how insignificant that was, and how angry that made me. So.
Isn't that crazy? Of all the other things that are going on, those things, because they stand out in your mind. And even leaving the hospital that day, it was, a nice day outside. It was a March day. Trees were getting green, and it was kind of pretty out. And I'm walking out just hoping that my feet will keep moving to get to the car. And there was somebody that was rushing into work and dropped her lunch and spilled some things out of it. And she was swearing and carrying on and going on. And it was going to, okay, this is a big deal. And to her it was. She was hurrying to get into work and getting her lunch together. And it was a big deal. But you just shake your head and go, this is, our whole world has changed forever.
Your priorities.
Yeah, your
Yeah.
perspective of life
Yep.
it truly changes when you have something major like that.
Oh, it was
Occur.
just huge. And you're just trying to keep one foot in front of the other, yeah.
So in the background of all of this, there's still an investigation that's going on because someone killed your husband. Are you getting updates on that? And how in the scheme of things that you're thinking about and dealing with at the time, how important was that?
It was huge because you're trying to grasp for any tiny bit of information that can help you understand what's going on. I was just desperate to hear anything because the whole thing made no sense to me.
Yeah.
And little pieces of things here and there, and it really wasn't, and actually probably until the trial that I got as much information as I did and learned as much about the man who killed him and all the things that were going on around in his life at the time. But it took a while to get it all. But I wanted, yes, I needed to hear everything that could be shared with me.
And we're not going to name him today because there's no need to do that.
Thank you.
I think Craig Dodge is the name that we want to talk about. And when you did have the trial, is resolution the wrong word?
People always say, you'll get some closure to it. That's not a good word. Yeah, that there, I don't know that there is closure. I think there's healing.
Okay.
And there's information that comes, but it's kind of like telling you after X number of months or years, you need to move on.
Yeah.
Don't ever say that. That's horrible. How do you move on? It doesn't mean that you don't still get up every day and go to work and take care of the kids or do whatever it is you need to do. You still do those things, but I kind of like maybe more looking at it as just moving forward, stepping forward. And even the hard part about moving forward is what do you take with you and what do you leave behind? And those are hard decisions to make. But even, during the trial, I did learn some things that helped me understand him more and get maybe a better picture of what a bad all-around guy he was when you heard his wife talk about it. And not only he told at least 5 people he was going to kill a cop. He didn't care who it was. He wasn't necessarily trying to kill Craig, but if a cop comes, I'm going to kill him. And several people knew he said he was going to kill a cop. And we didn't know till afterwards that he had also said after that he was going to kill both his children. He had an 8-week-old baby and a 3-year-old, and he was going to kill his children and his wife and then himself. That was his plan. And then I guess he freaked after he shot Craig and took off and didn't do that. But you think it's hard to wrap your head around somebody that is that kind of person.
Yeah. Yeah.
True monster.
Really, yeah, really just.
Yep. Evil.
Yep.
Is there any, you mentioned that LSO did a really good job. Is there anything that you wish that we didn't do that you wish we would have done?
Yes, but not necessarily for me, but for each other.
Okay.
I don't think that the support was there for the officers for each other or plans and, mental health services or anything to go. And there were, I don't know how many divorces that happened because I just kept hearing more and more officers are just shutting down. They're scared. They don't want to talk to their families about their jobs. And
That's good. And I think the deputies were reluctant to talk to you because they didn't know what to say. So they didn't say anything. It's just,
Right.
yeah. So.
No, I think that's very important to talk about, and it's something that we talked about a lot as an agency. We're really probably not where we want to be, but I think we're closer to where we need to be. But it's a work in progress, and those resources change, and we have to. I was just talking with a group in some training the other day. Whether you're a big agency, small agency, whether you have all the resources or none of the resources, even if you have all of the things, you still have to help people get over that stigma of reaching out and using them. And I think that's really the big challenge for law enforcement, and something that we're trying to address. But hearing that from you and the importance and what you saw afterwards, I think just helps to reaffirm that.
Well, one of the things when it initially happens, there's so much going on with the case portion of it, and then planning the funeral and all those. It's usually the week or two after everything has settled down. I think that's when it really smacks a lot to people.
Yeah,
and they
the balloon just...
Yeah. And I think that's the time where you start to start needing the help in doing that, because, like you said, initially you're just kind of walking like a zombie through that, just trying to get everything done and do that part. And I'm glad we've, as an agency, we are trying to get better. It's far away, and it's really hard for a lot of the older deputies to feel like they can reach out. And I think with the younger ones, it's being taught that, hey, it's okay. And I think as time goes, we're going to become a lot better as a profession.
When we were preparing for this episode, you put it this way, is that you don't get to quit. And I think that says a lot about your attitude towards this and your perspective that you took away from that. So when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about what that looked like for you, and what you chose to do with life afterwards. And we'll get into those details when we come back from a quick break.
Okay.
Hey, I'm Captain John Vick with the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. When it comes to your career, don't settle for good enough. Don't settle for ordinary. We won't either. Be different, be better, be exceptional. Start your future today at joinlso.com. Welcome back to the 902 podcast. We are having a National Police Week episode. So, Sheriff, help us out understand what is National Police Week? Where did that even come from?
Well, in 1963, President John F. Kennedy declared the week. He declared May 15th as National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Day, and the week which that falls in May as National Police Week. So May 15th is the Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Day, and then the week that falls in is Police Week. And so that has evolved over time to include quite a few ceremonies in Washington, D.C. at the Law Enforcement Memorial, that sort of thing.
So Barb, before we broke, we were talking about what you said is that you don't get to quit. And you certainly didn't quit after Craig died. So how did you get involved in National Police Week, and where did your life kind of go from there?
I had never heard of cops or National Police Week or police survivors, anything. And I did get a call from the National Cops Office, and they said that there was a young widow from South Dakota that wanted to come and see me if that was okay. And so I said, okay. And this lovely young woman from South Dakota whose husband was a trooper there and was hit on the road while he was moving a dog off the road. And somebody didn't see him, and he was hit and killed. And she had a 9-month-old baby. Anyway, she came to visit me, and she had just amazed me because she was, and this was maybe 2 years after his death, maybe not even that long, that she was even upright and talking and walking, and she could laugh. I mean, I looked at her and I thought, man, I hope I can someday just feel that laugh. And she just talked with me about everyday things and what she was doing, and her son and her parents, and, dealing with in-laws and all. They lived on a farm, and they had a lot of work to do there that he did, not a farm but a ranch. They had some horses, and how the deputies, or the people from his department, not the deputies, but the other troopers had come to help her with things. She gave me hope. She just gave me hope that maybe someday I can actually laugh and have a good time. And then she, connected me with Police Week for next year and said, I'm gonna be there. And she said, you're gonna be okay, and I'm gonna be here to see to it that you are.
Wow.
And it was huge.
Yeah.
It was just huge because I thought, you get it,
And I always feel guilty about that police week in 1988 because we at LSO didn't really know much about it. And Sarpy County actually sent you to police week. Their FOP lodge funded Barb's trip there, and I thought we should have done that. We just didn't know any better.
They were great. They actually met me at the plane,
Yep.
saw to it that I got to the hotel where I was supposed to be. And I mean, I had family with me, but we didn't know anything. And they were great. They were really swell. But they were really involved in some national ways too, so they knew a lot more about the whole thing that was going on there. But it was, they were super.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were great.
So talk to us a little bit about the activities and the events that are part of Police Week. And I'm sure they've probably expanded and grown over the years.
Oh my gosh, yeah. They really have. There's a lot that goes on during Police Week, both at like local and state and national levels. There are a lot of, smaller memorial services or other kinds of activities, get-togethers and things that people do. Nationally, there's a lot that goes on in D.C., but the three main activities that they have there are the Candlelight Vigil, which is on the night of the 14th. Well, usually they sometimes change it, but and it's at the site of the wall, the National Memorial Wall. And it's beautiful. It's a very, really, really nice. And then on the 15th is the service at the National Police Memorial Service, where all the families gather and there's a big wreath, and one member from each family comes forward as the name is called and puts a flower in that wreath, and then receives a medal from the National FOP. They're the ones that run that whole event, and they do an amazing job of it. It's really a huge undertaking, and it's beautiful. It's just very nice. And then through the Concerns of Police Survivors organization, that's a whole separate organization that deals with the families directly with support. It's a peer support organization. It's all based on peer support. They do provide counseling, which is a lot of it's done by the FBI or other counselors, but they provide that for them. But it's the primary work that the COPS organization done is peer support. And that's where I ended up getting more involved, was through the peer support.
So was that through some of the programming then that COPS provides? You mentioned some family seminars that they provide. How do those work?
Well, I went to the seminars the first year, and they had different ones for, depending on what your situation was. And well, first I'll tell you that when someone took me to the room and said, "This is where this is your room," and the sign on the door said, "Widows by felonious assault," and I kind of peeked in and I thought, I don't want these to be my people. I don't want to be one of them. And I had a hard time even walking in the door because I thought, I don't want this to be me. But they just dropped me off and left and said, "Here you go," and which is the best thing that they could do, because only widows by felonious assault could be in that room with a counselor. And that was really good for me to be with them. And it's funny, you get in that room and somebody says something silly, and one of the first things they could do is laugh, and you realize, okay, it's okay to laugh. Take a deep breath. This is tough. Let's laugh. But at the same time, there were sessions for parents, for siblings, for adult children. Co-workers. And there's a lot more since then. Now we have sessions for fiancés, for adult children and children that are at that in-between adult thing, that has like that outward bound type programs and things for them. So there's lots and lots and lots of sessions, a lot of coworker sessions. And even the coworker sessions now are divided out by the kind of death or where your relationship with the officer. And in addition to those, then during the summer is our summer program. They call them hands-on programs for all those groups that we just talked about. There's a lot of them, but so my first involvement there was to go into that room with my people, and walk out actually kind of feeling better and feeling like I'm okay. It's okay to laugh, and that there's hope, and we've got each other, and I'm still in touch with some of those people today.
Well, I think that was the thing that struck me about cops. I learned about cops by, when I started here, because as a deputy, you're told the stories and you learn about Craig, and that was really my first exposure to cops. So I was aware of the organization, but I think like a lot of us as deputies, you don't always know how to feel about it. And you're kind of expecting it to be, is it sad? How am I supposed to act? And
is it a touchy-feely thing?
Yeah. When you mention your people, my wife and I got to go to Police Week a few years ago, and we actually met you at one of these events, and it was really cool just to see the energy that you guys had. And you talk about laughter, and I mean, you guys were a riot. It was really fun just to see you and other spouses there. And obviously it's a club that nobody ever wanted to join in the first place, but it just gave me a whole different perspective on what goes on. I can never say that I know what it feels like to be you. But it was really cool just to see those interactions like you're talking about with your people. So
it is. They're treasures. The ones that I met that first year are still. I'm planning to go see one of them in Arizona in a couple of weeks. So, they're great.
Former Captain Tom Brookhauser and I went back for the first Cops Week after the dedication of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. And I think you had gotten a hold of us because there was a family from Missouri that had their son, I think, was a deputy sheriff, and it was like a 3-man department. And they didn't have the ability to send anybody back, and this family really wanted somebody in brown to walk them down the aisle. So Tom and I did that during the memorial service, and we also went to one of the co-workers seminars, which, you're reluctant to go to. It's touchy-feely, but it really it's very helpful. And so it was an interesting time.
When we were talking off the air about, I went to Quantico in 2007, and it was during the Police Week, and they have all the children come to Quantico and do the event there. And being part of that was unbelievable. The first part of it, they go through counseling and they go through different things of that. But then at the afternoon, they get to go outside and each person who's at the NA at that time teams up with a child. And I got an 11-year-old whose dad had just died from aphalonius, and just seeing his face and just playing and laughing, and he was so athletic and he wanted to go play ball, and I like doing all those things. And I mean, you just get so close to them, but you're always worried, are you going to say something wrong? But he had a blast. I think it just gave him a chance to not think about it.
Be a kid. Had a chance to be a kid.
Be a kid.
Yeah. And the kids meet other kids.
Yes.
And
Yes.
they stay in touch.
Yep.
A lot of them do. And there's always a list every year that some of the kids marry.
Mary, yeah, I've seen that list.
And
wow, really?
That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, my son dated a gal from Texas that she met there, and I thought they might get married. They ended up going separate ways, but it's really cool because they really do understand each other if they meet someone else there. But it's a great time, and the kids have a great time, and being in the hotel is great for the kids. There's a lot of activities for them there, but they're very safe to kind of let them run because a lot of them have been very protected, and they have no idea that there's like 500 cops in the place,
right.
And they can't get by with much. And somebody tries to sneak a joint up to their room, it's like somebody is there knocking on the door immediately saying, no, you can't do this. And,
Wow.
and that happens, they just don't realize. And there's dogs there that clear the area all the time. And of course, they're going to find anything that shouldn't be there. And the kids are going, oh, well, I guess this is not so funny. But that's what 16, 17-year-olds think is pretty cool to do, but they're busted so quickly, and then they just get laughed at afterwards, and so they just make a joke out of it. People really connect, and so I think that was what hit me. In fact, when I was leaving from my first year there, I saw people waving by and saying, "See you next year," and my first thought was, why in the world would you want to go through this again? Why would you want to? And I thought, there is no way in the world I'm going to come back next year. I don't. But as the year went on and I spent more time with some of the the women that I had gotten to know, and talking and sharing just problems and encouraging each other and saying, oh, what am I going to do? My kid's doing this, or what else is going on? Or even dealing with trying to figure out benefits or all that kind of stuff. And then I thought, I really want to see all these people again. I really want to check in with them and see how they're doing and see how old their kids are. And so I really wanted to go the next year. And it's like, people are so happy to see each other that you think if you were standing at the door watching people come in, you would never guess what's going on in this place. That there are people that are so hurt and so broken and so needy and so terribly, terribly sad, because they really kind of know how to relate to each other and how to. So anyway, it was after that, really, I think your question was getting more involved, that I found out about kind of how the organization runs. And I thought, I think I could like to see if I could be a regional trustee for the Plains area, is what we're called. And
because I don't think Nebraska had a cops organization at the time of Craig's death.
Well, and even the national organization was fairly new.
It was very new.
Okay.
And had very little money at the beginning. Very, very little money. Yeah.
So you went from kind of being apprehensive about even walking in the door to your first seminar to now you're a regional trustee in the COPS organization. So how did your journey through the COPS organization progress?
I learned a lot as a regional trustee, and a lot of it was, reaching out to people, trying to encourage them. And like Terry said earlier, there aren't a lot of deaths in Nebraska, and thank goodness. And so there weren't a lot of Nebraska people to connect with, but there were from other parts of a region. And so you as a regional trustee, you get in contact with someone, with the department as well as with the family, to see what they need and try to help them and encourage them, tell them about Police Week, and help them get in touch with, if they don't know who to get in touch with, whatever. And did it. So I did that for 2 years, and really, it really helped me heal, because I felt like as I learned things, I could share them with other people, and they shared with me. They helped me grow and learn and find some answers that I needed, I guess. And also were people that you could rant to them if you're just so angry, or if you're so sad on anniversary dates or whatever, that would get it. If you say, I'm just, and maybe you only need to do that to somebody you can call in the middle of the night and cry, and it's okay to do that. So connecting people was just so helpful. But then I also saw the organization growing. And when I would go to D.C. for meetings, Susie Sawyer was the national director at the time. I stayed at her house and slept on her pull-out couch because there wasn't money for a hotel. She picked me up at the airport. Where there were things that, so that was great. And then after a couple of years of that, I thought, what would happen if I ran for president? And I thought, that's really a crazy thing. They've never had anybody from this part of the country be president. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, let's give it a shot and see what happens. Why not? And I saw the organization growing and things that I would really like to do. And they were really just starting education for the departments on how to respond to line of duty death, because there really hadn't been a lot of training for the departments. And some of them were really struggling, and some of them really screwed up. So with getting some of those kind of things going, as well as outreach and expanding the programs, like at the time there was not the hands-on programs that exist now, they call them, there weren't any. And when we first started, the very first one, in fact, we called it Widows Weekend. And now they call it Survivors, or, spouses, survivors. But it was just Widows Weekend. And there were 7 of us, and that was it. I don't know when I've laughed so much in my life. We went canoeing, and we did things that we just needed to laugh, and then sometimes we'd have our times to cry. But I wanted to see those programs grow. And so I ran for president and was elected national president.
What year was that?
91.
That was the dedication of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in
Right.
D.C. that I was talking about earlier.
Oh.
So I was very fortunate. So the memorial is going to be dedicated in D.C. Barb is the national president of COPS. And our Fraternal Order of Police, our FOP Lodge, decided they were going to send one person from the sheriff's office, all expenses paid, to D.C. for the dedication. It was simply a lottery. You put your name in the hat, and my name got drawn.
Oh.
So I was very fortunate to be able to go and, gosh, they had a parade from the Capitol to the memorial site, and then they had a 24-hour reading of names. So it started alphabetically with A, whatever first A state is, Alaska, Alabama, whatever it is. And I think Nebraska was up at like 2 or 3 a.m. And then they read all the names of all the Nebraska officers who had been killed in line of duty, and then New York after that, and they were up there for a couple of hours, you know. And it was a very, very moving experience to go to the dedication of the Law Enforcement Memorial. And of course, Barb spoke at the dedication, shared the dais with President Bush 41, and pretty cool stuff.
Yes.
So the sheriff told us a story, but I want to hear it from you about your time at the memorial with President Bush.
Okay. That was a little bit of a scary time for me, as you know, I was a little nervous about sitting with the president and getting all organized to be there anyway.
And there were thousands and thousands of people there. I mean, it was huge.
Yeah, I mean, it fills the whole grass area.
Yeah,
I mean, it
does.
people forever.
Yeah, there were a lot of people there.
So you're up on stage.
And I'm up on stage, and initially when, before, this is just an aside, but they were showing me the dais and this little pull-out step under there, because they use the president. If the president is there, it's his podium, because it's exactly the right height for the president to use. Who was like 6'4", I'm 5'2". So there was a little pull-out step in front of it, and they said, you need to get up on this step so that you can do this. And all you do is you pull it out with your toe. I'm looking around and thinking, right, I'm going to stand on one foot in heels. I'm already shaking and get this thing out and not trip. But the reason they had the step in there is because the Queen of England had been with him. And when she used that podium, they couldn't see her because she was so short. And they called her the talking hat. So right after that, they put this step in. So I got to use this step anyway. And it worked out fine to get on the step. And I guess it was okay. It was my turn to speak. And but it was very moving. The music and everything was very moving. So I sat down again, and I sat by the president, and there was a song that made me cry. And of course, at the time, I'm fiddling. I don't know where my purse is, and I'm crying. And he takes out his handkerchief and hands it to me, as a gentleman would do, right? And so I'm wiping my eyes with the handkerchief, and then pretty soon I blew my nose on it. And I thought, what have I done? What did I just do? I just blew my nose on the President of the United States handkerchief. What am I supposed to do with it now? And I sat there for a little bit just thinking, oh my gosh. And there's all this other stuff going on around me that's just huge. And I'm thinking about this handkerchief. What am I going to do with it? And finally I sat there and I had it, and I looked up at him. Of course, he's very tall. I said, and he kind of looked up at him, and I said, Mr. President. And he realized what I was talking about, and he said, just keep it. Barbara always makes me carry two. So, oh my gosh, it was just, that was kind of a big memory for me from that day. I just shook my head and go, what a goofball you can be. But so even in the midst of all these emotional things, there are things that you just got to shake your head at and go, oh my gosh, we're still
I just remember hearing that story, just laughing. And then everybody who's ever heard me talk about the dedication to the memorial has to hear that story, because I think it's priceless.
Oh, I can't believe that I did it, but I did.
Well, you got to keep it though. Then
I got to keep it. I washed it, and I put it in my scrapbook, and I do have it as a keeper. So it was. He was such a gentleman. He was just such a good man, such a nice man, and it was fun to get to meet him and have a little time to chat with him. And his wife was there, Barbara was there, but they made her sit kind of way back in the back, which was just wrong. She should have been able to sit with us, but nobody asked me how the seating plan should go. But anyway.
If you want a challenging career, a career where you can make a difference in your life, your family's life, and the lives of those in your community, come and join the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. To learn more or to apply, visit us online at www.joinlso.com.
Well, we've talked about a lot of the activities and retreats throughout the year that COPS puts on, aside from National Police Week. How did those help you, and just your involvement in general, how did those help you deal with Craig's death?
I think spending time with other people that kind of become our blue sisters, that we call them, is really helpful to feel like I'm not going crazy. The things that I'm dealing with and that are really hard and seem scary and weird, they're doing the same thing. That I'm not going crazy. I'm not losing my mind because I'm doing this, because I can't make decisions or I can't find things or those kind of things. I'm not going crazy. And that's hugely helpful for us. The other thing that's really helpful with those groups is if there is somebody in the group that is going a little bit off the ledge too far, drinking too much, drugs, doing what other things that are very scary, they're very dangerous, that we can reach out to those and, help them get the help that they need to do it. So it's, they're just very helpful. You find your blue sisters and spend time with them, and the parents do the same things. In fact, initially when they started some of the parents groups, they've had the husbands and wives together, and they found that didn't work because they would worry too much about what the other one thought. So the parents now are in separate groups and have a father's group and a mother's
That's
group.
interesting.
Yeah.
And I think men and women grieve just differently.
They do. And so, yeah, they found that it worked much better when they had all the fathers separate from the mothers. And now that's the way that they do them. But so there's a lot of the groups are great. You just, you learn about people. And then the organization started doing more with department education and teaching them how to plan for and respond to line of duty deaths. And those are real important. Those are still going on regionally.
The traumas of law enforcement
Right.
training is what that's called,
yes,
right?
Yes,
One
thank
of
you.
their big ones.
Yes, yeah, and there's a lot of those, and we may end up actually at some point having to have Police Week like as we see it, because there's so many people. It's just grown so much with more people learning about it, and more families attended, and more extended families, that those may end up being a regional thing somewhat too. I don't know, but
Sure.
it's just grown and grown and grown and grown and grown.
Well,
It's kind of sad it has to, though. We talk about that, but that just means that there's more law enforcement officers losing their life. And that's the sad thing about this thing growing
It is.
That's the reality of it all.
and we wish that someone that's listening to this podcast would never have to go through what you went through. But the reality is that there might be somebody out there. And what would you share, or what advice would you have for the person who loses their spouse, as far as, what they can do to help themselves through that process? You talked a little bit about just the importance of reaching out for help when we were prepping for this episode a little bit. How did that look for you, or what are the things that maybe you wouldn't always think of?
Well, finding a good counselor is really important. A lot of people think that your families are your best help. The more you talk to people, we find out they're typically not the best help. My mom, rest her soul, was of no help to me because all she wanted to do was talk about the guy that killed him. And she would, call him names and do whatever, but she just couldn't. But I think that some people it's easier for them to ask for help than others, and would contact the department, because the department, would always say, if you need anything, call us. We will do whatever we can. And there are some people that's easier for them to do. It was not easy for me. And I still, people say, what do you need? Be sure, sheriff will say, if you need something, call me. And it's just not easy for me to do. I did finally ask the department for help when, during the trial, when I parked my car out front and it was towed. And I just was in a wad. I was in a mess. And
I forgot about that.
yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I called the sheriff and said, what happened? They said, why didn't you call us? We'll give you a ride. We can take you. You don't have to figure out how to get to the trial by yourself. And I never thought about asking for help with that. And they were very happy to give me rides back and forth for those kind of things. They didn't mind doing it at all. But it's sometimes hard to ask. So I think it is important for people in the department to continue to offer, and maybe offer specific things. Even if it's just, would you like to go to lunch? And if you say, I really like a certain place to go, let's go have lunch there. Not necessarily to talk about bad things, but maybe say, how are the kids doing in school, or what's going on, something else. Just to kind of keep in touch, and then to ask those specific questions. do you need any help with your car? Is there something that, and you would go, I have no idea where to go to get something fixed on it because my husband always did it. Or, depending on what the other relationships are, I don't know where to go for that. Or I don't know who to call to fix this crack in the concrete. And, if not that they necessarily expect you to do the work, but say, this is somebody I trust that can come and paint your house. Don't just go look on Google and pick out a number for somebody to come into your house and paint your house. They can help you find somebody that can do that work. And if you need somebody to go help you buy a car and it's really interesting because I have found they did with some of the surveys that it was something like 80% of widows bought a new car within the first year. And they said there's a couple of reasons for that. If they had an older car, they really didn't know what to do to keep it up. And then they sometimes just needed their own car that wasn't my husband's car.
Yeah.
And they had my own car. So they need help with things like that, to just maybe go with them or give them an idea, or this is a salesperson or a company that I trust. So those are really great things to offer them. It's just that there's stuff that I can't find or, don't know what to do with it, just to be a pal. And maybe they don't want to go to lunch with you, but, maybe and it might even be helpful if it's not necessarily a man, but it's a woman from the department to say, reach out to them, and that way there might be things that they would talk to that easier. But counseling's really important. I don't know where I would have been without my counselor. She was a saint. She kind of kept me from going crazy, I think. But.
Can I ask how long did you go and use that service?
I went really regularly for about a year, and then another year, maybe every other week, and then kind of once a month, and then after that, just checked in occasionally. But you have to remember, if the first counselor you go to, you don't really connect with, find another one, because not everybody is a match for everybody with a counselor. But speaking of that, can I go back to something we talked about a little earlier? And that was the department. And I think that is one of the places that LSO, I think, I shouldn't say dropped the ball, but struggled with, I think, is helping each other. And I wish that there would have been more counseling available and made people comfortable to get it. And so I don't think that happened. So I think there were a lot of challenges with emotional things within the department, as you can understand. I mean, they lost a friend, they lost a coworker.
And spouses just didn't understand.
Right.
Well, so our counseling sessions were the night of the funeral, which was St. Patty's Day, at Woody's house drinking beer.
Right.
And, unfortunately that's the help that we gave each other. And it's not always helpful,
Yeah. And you try to, and I think some of that's getting better, because I think this next generation, now that I'm getting to be in the old one, aren't as hesitant to go to counseling and, to offer it. And even, with the CISM programs that are around now that weren't then. So I think that's a really important way for the department to take care of itself internally, and just to keep an eye on each other, and don't be afraid to reach out for help and get it in whatever way. And not even just line of duty death things, but other things that go in with it. Because you're right, it's really hard for spouses to understand what's going on in a lot of ways.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that there were probably 4 or 5 divorces within our agency in the 18 months or so that followed Craig's death, and I was one of them. And you have to think back of what effect that had on that relationship.
They just don't understand, and cops sometimes can be real knuckleheads. They just,
Oh no, we can't.
Did I say that?
Oh my gosh, who would think that?
Now I know how John's going to use the bleep word out of that. Probably bleep that out, but yeah. But really, it'd be difficult to get him to go to counseling sometimes, and I'm sure the spouses lots of times need the counseling as well, just to say, I don't know, he shuts me out, or she shuts me out, and they don't know what to do about that.
Yeah, a lot of times, you go to the job and then they come home and all they officers want to do is just sit in their lazy boy and do their veg, and they shut everything out, and that's when you have a wife and you have kids and all that does not go over well, and that's a true issue.
Well, let's transition a little bit, because a lot of our listeners maybe aren't employees here, and maybe only know a law enforcement officer just, from a casual, occasional relationship, how can people that aren't directly involved with law enforcement get involved if they want to? Can anybody attend Police Week events?
Anybody can come to the candlelight vigil, and anybody can come to the memorial service. The other things that are offered through COPS really are for families and coworkers, and that's who are welcome to come to those. And there are a lot of activities that everybody can go to there, even within the COPS thing. I mean, not everybody, but the coworkers and everybody can come to picnic in the park, or we don't call it that anymore, but a barbecue that we have usually the last night to attend those things, and the luncheons and the luncheon speakers and those things. But those really are specific to the families because they address specific issues. If there are breakout sessions, if you're dealing with you're getting your benefits, or if the death was a suicide with dealing, that's a whole different ball game with dealing with suicide. So there's a lot of different that we really try to reach out and offer the sessions for people that they're asking for.
Sure.
So
John, to go to I think there are a lot of local events during Police Week that aren't on the scale of Washington, D.C., but they can certainly attend those. Blair is going to have a police a walk from their municipal building to their courthouse on May 15th. So, we're going to have a service here on the front steps of our building on May 16th at noon. And then Grand Island, where the Nebraska Law Enforcement Memorial is located, is on Friday the 19th at 10 a.m. So I think Governor Pillam's going to speak at that event. So and I know Omaha Police have a ceremony at their headquarters to honor their fallen officers. So there are a number of events statewide that people can attend to show their support for their law enforcement agencies.
Absolutely. And we have spent a lot of time talking about the National Police Week and the National COPS organization, but recently we've got a Nebraska chapter of COPS, or Concerns of Police Survivors. Tell us about that.
Yep, it is relatively new, and strangely we tried a few years ago to get a chapter, and because you hate to say it, there weren't any local deaths that had been in a while, but it was hard to get people motivated. And it took the death, actually, Carrie, I don't remember her last name.
Orozco.
Okay. When she died, there were some people that were really activated, saying, in Omaha, that just said, we didn't really know how to plan or respond. I mean, we kind of figured out how to do a funeral on the fly for something like that, and they really weren't on it. So really started working more and put together, and they were really the ones that have been the most responsible. But because we're such a spread out state, it is really difficult. And there is somebody on the board that's from Scottsbluff, but they, because most of the the meetings are by Zoom. But just getting started and trying to get a few goals and things established that they can do. And of course, you start out with no money, so they're trying to do something and help some of the families because that want to go to DC. Oftentimes the immediate family has more money than the parents or brothers or sisters or whatever that want to go. So they try to help get money for other people that are family that want to attend, that don't have the money to go. So there's a few things. Really, one of the things I'd like to do eventually is do a survey of all the departments in Nebraska and find out who has plans for response to line of duty death. And if not, get them some and help them get started, and not just print off a copy of something you find on the internet, but to really get a plan and adapt it to your own department's size and abilities. And
that's great.
That'd be a great training topic for one of the state conferences that we have for sheriffs and police together. That's a great idea.
And see if we can do that.
Because you really need those. Because when it happens, if you don't have it written down and you're going to miss something. And so
it's really hard.
Yeah, having a clear mind and having it written out prior to those kind of events. And again, I hope we don't have to use ours on a situation like Craig's.
Yeah, it's a plan we hope we never have to use.
Yeah.
But you better have it.
Yeah.
Well, for people that are listening to this podcast, how can they support the national or Nebraska COPS organizations?
The nationally, I'll speak to that first. Financially is always helpful. If you could donate money, that's great. If you can come during Police Week and volunteer, it takes literally thousands of volunteers to make these events happen. There are very few paid people that do all of this work. All the counselors just come, volunteer. The board people, there are a lot of other, past survivors that come and volunteer. But Ben mentioned earlier the kids going to Quantico and the things that they're great kids programs. But it takes a lot of volunteers to make those happen, to get them there and be with them and do a lot of those things. So, and for all the other events, it takes a lot of volunteers to manage the memorial service and to do the candlelight vigil. So, there are a lot of other activities that go on. There's always a run and things like that. But they could sure volunteer and to contact cops on a local level. Be the same way. They're, financially, they're really struggling to get started. If you'd like to hold some kind of event as a fundraiser to help the group, nobody is paid to be on that board. But if some of them want to be able to go to Police Week or help some of the families, they would help. Having that money to help them would be just great.
Well, we'll put some links to National Cops and the Nebraska Cops chapter on our Facebook page when we publish this episode, so people will be able to go and find a little bit more information about those organizations.
Great, I really appreciate it.
To close out, let's talk a little bit about law enforcement officers, though. How can they help at Police Week? And you had a couple stories of some touching things that you've experienced at Police Week. Well,
and a couple of different things. One of them is kind of a combination of so many other things that we've been talking about. But when I was during registration one day, a woman came in from South Carolina, I think she was, a widow with 3 small children who came alone, no family, not one person from her department, and she had 3 preschoolers. So Lynn Bebo, who's another past president, and I kind of hooked up with her and to help her kind of guide things and help with the kids and do those things there. Well, the day that we went to the memorial service, which she knew that she was going to be sitting at this service, with 3 children and no family, we found her an escort, so she did have an escort for the service, so that was great. And so we're during the memorial service. Then she's, we've got all the kids and it's all very serious. And it came time to do the flowers, and the little kids. We had Pedro, Noberto, and Celia, and each of us had one, and I had Pedro. Just about her time to go, and Pedro has to go to the bathroom. As you can just imagine what a 3-year-old's going to do. And it just made me think, well, thank goodness there was somebody else there. What would she do?
Yeah.
So I take Pedro to the bathroom, and they go on with everything else. And you have to go outside security, which isn't any picnic anyway, to get to the bathroom, but we take Pedro to there. And Pedro had a button with his dad's picture on it that he was wearing. And we're on the way, and in his dad's picture, he had a blue shirt on. And we're walking, and he sees an officer with a shirt like his dad's, and he wants to touch it. And he just kept saying, blue shirt, blue shirt, blue shirt. And so I walked over there with him to see this, and this officer has no idea who this child is. He doesn't know he's a survivor child. And he's going to give him a patch, he's picking him up, and he just kept saying, blue shirt, blue shirt. And I said, can he touch your shirt? He wants to touch your shirt. And so he picked him up. He said, sure. And he starts touching his shirt. And then he looked at the badge, and he had the band, the mourning band across it. And he said, I know why you have that on there. And the guy said, why? And he said, because my daddy died, and you're sad too.
Wow.
It was I'm sure that guy will never forget that. He didn't know what it was, but what we had talked about, having the badges and anything. So it was just a very touching moment for him that he knew. And then I'm thinking, this officer's not just going to give him a badge. He's probably going to give him his hat and his coat and his boots and anything else that he could, because he was so touched by this little boy. And so that was a really moving experience. And one of the things also that the kids just love is during Police Week, there's always lots and lots of police cars there you talked about and the families get the escort from the hotel there. And when I was sitting with Pedro on there, he just kept looking at all these cars, and he said, I didn't know this many people knew my daddy died. So the people who show up there with their patrol cars or with their motorcycles, they really make an impact on these families. It's so touching, and it just means so much to them. It was just a great experience that I will never forget with that. The other thing that really impacted me was actually during the one of the memorial services. Paul Harvey was there, and who's also a surviving child.
Yeah, his father was a Tulsa police officer.
Yeah, okay, I couldn't remember where it was. Thank you. But at the very end, he said, "I don't know why good men and women want to be law enforcement officers, but thank God they do." And I've thought about that so many times because I think I'm on the same page with him. I don't know why you do what you do. I don't know why, but thank God you do. Thank God you do.
Thank you.
Well, Barb, I don't know if I can say it much better than that. We've just enjoyed so much having you here with us today and just hearing your story and kind of learning from you and some of the things that you had to learn that you never wanted to learn. But we really appreciate you sharing those with us today.
It's an honor to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. That's all the time that we have for the 902 podcast today. Be sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you enjoy podcasts so that you can download future episodes. If you're interested in learning more about careers at the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office, be sure to apply at joinlso.com. And like we discussed in the episode, we will have links available for the National and Nebraska Cops organizations on our Facebook page, which you can find by searching for @LSO Nebraska. That's on Facebook. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you so much for listening. Goodbye.